music. Everyone listens to it. People have playlists that can go on for hours, filled with all different styles of music.
But recently, people have resurfaced the popular mid-2000s Tumblr trend of sad girl music. At the time of the trend's first wave of popularity, it was just called Sad Girl and was a hashtag to share posts on the app. Now, the trend has evolved due to social media and mostly just represents a music genre that is endlessly fueled by the internet and depressing song lyrics. Funnily enough, I noticed that something similar in the music scene happened 30 years ago in the 90s, and that same thing happened in the 60s. In the 60s, music reflected the changing current in American society. Songs discussed the protests of the Vietnam War and the Civil Rights Movement. Songs like Respect by Aretha Franklin.
Just live it. R-E-S-P-E-C-T. Find out what it means to me. R-E-S-P-E-C-T. T-F-T-C-T.
And The Sound of Silence by Simon and Garfunkel.
Hello, darkness, my old friend. I've come to talk with you again.
Resonated with the public and are still being played to this day. When they were first released, the songs were inspirational and groundbreaking because they touched on topics that reflected the atmosphere of the 60s. The people who were protesting in the 60s just wanted to create a positive change in the world, and music was an outlet for their feelings. Flash forward 30 years, and music in the 90s exploded into a variety of genres and sounds. The beginnings of the sad girl music can be dated to the 90s, and pop music from Britney Spears and others took over, and hip-hop became popular. New music genres like grunge appealed to the youth culture because of the honest and relatable songs that weren't shy to discuss addiction and depression. According to Nirvana's frontman Kurt Cobain, I like to complain and do nothing to make things better. I like to blame my parents' generation for coming so close to social change, then giving up after a few successful efforts by the media and government to deface the movement by using the Mansons and other hippie representatives as propaganda examples on how they were nothing but unpatriotic, communist, satanic, inhumane diseases, and in turn, the baby boomers became the ultimate conforming yuppie hypocrites a generation has ever produced. Sentiment was common throughout most of the youth that followed the genre. The 60s and 90s had massive societal changes that happened, but both had one thing in common. They were examples of a conformist mindset. In the 60s, the anti-war music lovers, aka hippies, gathered for the Democratic Convention of 1968 to protest the war in Vietnam and other issues, congregated in Chicago at Lincoln Park, and it became a type of music festival. For a while, things were going fine, despite the National Guard keeping watch. Eventually, a boy climbed a flagpole and the police tried to arrest him. The crowd became angry and violence ensued. That was the theme for the rest of the convention until it ended. While there were people who definitely believed in ending the war, it is pretty likely that most have just joined the movement to join. In a similar fashion, 30 years after the original Woodstock, the music festival celebrated its anniversary by hosting another festival. Unfortunately, the festival was not 3 days of peace and music due to hot weather, little to no water being sold, and a variety of aggressive music. While there were many things that went wrong in the festival, the already clashing and noisy crowd was, to an extent, influenced by the music. During the 3 festival days, the crowd slowly began to unravel into horrific actions. These 2 examples are very extreme, but are representative of how easily people can be swayed to behave in ways they would have never done on their own. Both decades had great music that explored all facets of life, but there was a sense of I'll go where the crowd goes type of mindset. Conforming to trends is not inherently a bad thing, but it can lead to harmful behavior. Now, it has been a little over 30 years since the 90s, and something similar is starting to occur. A huge defining moment in this new decade is the pandemic. It left a large scar on the world, and a way to release emotions from that time is to listen to music that reflects the state of the world. Enter the sad girl music genre taking over. The genre was reintroduced in the 2010s with artists such as Lorde and Lana Del Rey, who were reviving the sound on Tumblr. Once 2020 rolled around, sad girl music began to have a more specific sound and theme to the songs, and it has definitely grown in popularity since. Instead of playing around with heavy synth music like Laura did in her album Melodrama, there was an influx of polished acoustic sounds. A prime example of a current popular sad girl music artist is Phoebe Bridgers. While she explores her sound more than others, the content of her songs is extremely vulnerable. On her critically acclaimed album Punisher, she expresses feelings of depression in such a delicate and mesmerizing way. Bridgers and other artists are creating songs that are heartbreaking, and people are craving that sadness more and more. Personally, most of my playlists consist of sad girl music. Wanting to listen to sad songs is not a bad thing. There are multiple and, well, possibly a never-ending list of playlists from this trend. I am a sheep, if you will, following the flock of this music trend, and it's fun. Having songs to relate to is extremely validating, and singing the songs loudly in the car is so cathartic. However, for all the good the music is doing, it is having notable effects. Consistent exposure to anything is not that great. Music is no exception. From the 60s and 90s, we have learned the repercussions music can have. Of course, the examples used were extreme, and I'm not proposing that something similar is going to happen, but it is interesting that there is once again a rise in the popularity of songs that are reflective of the world in a new way. This phenomenon of reflective music is not limited to just the 30 years I mentioned. However, the most notable difference is how music has affected and stuck with the world. All of these decades have had significant societal changes, and music has allowed for these emotions to have a space and a platform to promote change. And the timing of this isn't a coincidence either. 30 years is pretty close to the length of a generation. As people involved in the music scene in the late 60s grew up and had kids, their kids would have grown up listening to the same music their parents enjoyed. And when they started listening to their music in the 90s, it would make sense they would enjoy songs critiquing society. It's the same with the 90s and the 2020s. History tends to have similarities and create patterns. And right now, I'm excited to see what happens to music in this decade and in the 2050s. That's so crazy to say.